Okay, thank you so much. We do have a title for today's presentation, but I've been shopping around doing some market testing for some other titles. I'm toying around with changing the name of this to Rise of the Machines. I'm trying to look for things from the movies, from science fiction, to give it a little more pizzazz, a little more sex appeal. I was thinking iRobot, Will Smith, of course, has become kind of controversial, so maybe this isn't the greatest reference. I'm still working on it. I'm open to feedback. Please let me know what you think at the end of this talk. But right now we're going to settle on something kind of prosaic and pretty straightforward, which is finding your place in a new digital world. Now I'm going to start today's presentation with a story. Okay, no better way to start than with a narrative. So, as Susan mentioned, I work for CAI. I've been here for 20 years. We are based in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. This is where we are. We're right on near the Delaware River. That's what Lehigh County looks like. And of course, being a based in Lehigh County, the county itself is naturally, client of ours, and they've been a client for a long time. And they came to us a couple of years ago with a project, which kind of changed the course of my career at CAI. And they have a criminal division where if you are incarcerated for gang-related crimes, you go into this sort of system, you sort of serve your time, and when you're released back into the community, the county is actually allowed legally to track your online social media activity for a period of time in order to determine if you represent any ongoing risk to the community. Now, naturally, there's something called the U.S. Constitution. We still have one in this country, and we don't live in a police state, and people's freedoms have to be protected. You really shouldn't be able to track people indefinitely without some type of warrant, some type of justification. So, the county has to balance the needs of the community with the protections that are in our Constitution. And they've done this with a system that they've created. It's kind of a scoring system where certain things, actions were, you might, maybe if you flash a sign, you score points. So you might, be given 10 points for that. If you're associating with a known felon, you might get 50 points. If you say something that's sort of inflammatory, you might get 100 points. There's a scoring system that scores your activity online. And if your total aggregate score at any point is at or above a certain level, the county is legally allowed to continue tracking you because you represent a risk. It's kind of like in many ways, it's kind of analogous to your driving record, which is that, you get points, and, if your points reach a certain level, they punish you in some way. And then, but also similarly, if you, over time, those points kind of deteriorate. And so if at some point, if your score drops and it drops below that predetermined number, the county not only must they stop tracking you, they have to flush you completely from their system, and then they can never track you again unless, of course, you wind up back in they're arrested and back in their system. So that is obviously a very expensive and time-consuming process, but the county is committed to it. And so they turn to us for help in trying to find a way using technology to do this cheaper and more efficiently. This is a true story. We turned to a third party for some help, and we found a resource totally unskilled by the name of Douglas. This is Douglas's story, and Douglas had absolutely no marketable skills and no technical skills. And we took Douglas on, and we trained Douglas for about 6 months and how to do this very highly specialized work. And you can imagine, there's a lot of subtlety to it. There's a fair amount of of um, of judgment that is called into play. There's interpretation issues when something's serious, when something facetious. There's disambiguation. You have people that have the same name, and that has to be sorted out. And then there's the technical aspects of it. And after about 6 months of training, we deployed Douglas to the client site, and he was instantly able to displace three of the county's senior analysts. He generated for us the about $150,000 a year in revenue. And here's the best part of all: his cost back to us was about $20,000 a year. Sounds pretty good to be true. It is a true story. There's just one small oops. It looks like we lost that slide. There was a slide of a robot there, and I forgot that we cannot do builds in WebEx. So unfortunately, you're not seeing the image there, which is that Douglas is a robot. Okay, that the story was entirely true except for one small detail, which is that Douglas is a robot. Now he's not a robot, three-dimensional like you might see from the movies. Obviously, he's something that we call robotic process automation. but it's robotic nonetheless. Now, when I first heard about this, it kind of really changed my life because I was kind of blown away by it, and I had a lot of had a lot of questions about the power of this technology. But above all, why the nomenclature? Why do you call it robotic process automation? Because it just sounds like software to me, right? It's just code ultimately, it's just software. These are not three-dimensional robots. And we have a bad habit in our industry of kind of coming up with slick names and renaming things that are actually old concepts that have been around for a long time. If you've been in IT long enough, you're kind of familiar with this trend. And the people I talked to, very smart people, were very quick to disabuse me of this notion. They said, well, yeah, of course it is just software, but it definitely deserves this new nomenclature because it is software that is doing a level of work that has heretofore never been possible for software. So these bots, these algorithms, these programs are actually, that when executed, are actually able to go in and out of different applications to get data, to import data. They're able to communicate through email and respond to email. I mean, in the organizations where we use these bots, they actually have to be onboarded with the HR department as employees. They're even given names. And in most cases, the people who are interacting with them don't even realize that they're not dealing with a human being. So this is a huge step forward in terms of software and what software can do. But above all, this poses an enormous threat. It's not just an opportunity. Of course, it's an opportunity, but it poses an enormous threat to the workforce worldwide because there are millions of people that have jobs that are clerical in nature, that are back office in nature, that are immediately susceptible to being replaced by these bots. And this is big questions in place for the future of work and the nature of work, not just in this country but also worldwide. I mean, if you think about it, you know, everything about the story was true. It did take us 6 months to actually train the underlying software to do these particular tasks that the client wanted, and that's very high value work. We have very high skilled people that are actually doing that training and doing that tuning. But once deployed, the costs back to us are only the licensing cost per year for the software, which is about $25,000, and you can see the margins. If we can actually generate that much revenue, $150,000, it's an enormous opportunity for us. It's also an enormous opportunity in savings for the client. We are naturally going to find more and more ways to kind of use this technology, and our clients are going to want to find more and more ways to sort of use it in their organizations. And so, you know, there's an old saying, the future is not here. The future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And that's sort of the situation that we're in right now. You may or may not have heard of this, but I'm telling you, it will come to you. It is coming to your company soon. It's just working its way through corporate America, you know, swiftly. Sooner or later, it will show up on your doorstep. But I'm not here to talk about necessarily about robotic process automation. What I'm actually here to tell you is that RPA, which is, or sometimes it's called IPA, which is intelligent process automation, is simply one of many new technological trends that are out there that are all coming into maturity at the same time. They are each of which revolutionary in their own right, and they are converging upon each other, creating all kinds of combinatorial possibilities and outcomes that nobody is able to really get their head around, nobody is able to see into, and which makes it consequently very difficult to predict the impact that this is going to have on business models, on the nature of work, on jobs, and on the economy. McKinsey several years ago has famously said that as a result of all of this, they expect that 3 out of 10 businesses are actually going to face extinction, which is a pretty serious prediction. And of course, all of this is actually being backed up by the continuing growth in computing power, which you're familiar with Moore's law. It's been going on ever since the advent of the transistor, which is that price performance ratios double every 18 to 24 months. And of course, you've heard it a million times. That's the reason why, you know, we have a cell phone in our pocket that's more powerful than all the computers that put a man on the moon. And it's also the reason why we are now at a point where there are billions of transistors on semiconductor chips, and that the tiniest layer of these chips is at the 4 or 5 nanometer length, which is essentially the atomic level. So it is a highly specialized manufacturing process. This is there aren't that many people in the world that can produce this sort of stuff, which is why, of course, you have bottlenecks worldwide with the supply chain with semiconductors. But also, it's the reason why a lot of people say, hey, if you're down to the atomic level, you can't get much smaller than that, and that means that Moore's law is actually going to be slowing down. But this process will continue. Moore's law is here to stay. What will happen is that we will break through and find other paradigms for computing power. It might be quantum computing, it might be biological computing, it might be DNA computing, but there will be other paradigms beyond the current silicon paradigm, which has served us for the past 50 years, and that will allow us to continue this progress forward. And of course, this is jet fuel for all of these technological trends. So don't let the naysayers about Moore's law make you think that this is going to slow down. It's not. It's probably actually going to speed up. So might sound pretty grim. Oh, millions of people losing their job, how are they going to adapt? What's the work of the future? But, it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a positive side to this. I don't want to sound, I care a lot about people. I care a lot about whether they can adapt or not. And, unemployment is a terrible scourge for people in their lives and families. But the reality is that for any person who can't adapt to this or who's unwilling to adapt to this, there's also going to be people who thrive on this and who are going to be able to see it as an opportunity. It can be a misfortune or it can be an opportunity, and so it really depends on how you see it. It's not. You've heard this saying before. It's not the strongest who survive or the most intelligent, but those who are the most responsive to change. And I do believe that those of you who embrace change, who are excited about change, who see opportunity in change, will do very, very well. And there's also going to be a lot of people that just aren't. They're at the end of their career. They're going to retire early. They're not going to want to put the work in to adapt, and you will pick up the pieces from these folks. So if you take that attitude, I think this could be the most exciting and the most profitable time in your career. Now, they call all of this. They have a lot of different names for what's going on. Some people will say digital transformation. That's sort of a generic term, but it really refers to people use it in different ways. It really refers to the new business value that's being created as a result of all of these new technologies being deployed. And the new business value that you can create within your organizations. They also will refer to this as the fourth industrial revolution. Okay, you've heard that term, and we've had a first industrial revolution, which was with the industrialization, and we had factories and industrialization, and starting in the UK and in the 19th century, and then you had the second part of that revolution, which involved transportation, specifically things like railroads, but also, more importantly, electricity, which transformed everything about the industrialized world. And then, of course, you had the computer revolution, which was roughly started around the 50s and the 60s, which totally, again, transformed business. And not only were in each of these phases was of these revolutions was incredibly transformational and disruptive, but also lasted for decades. And so you want to keep that in mind. I like this term because it really, digital transformation is kind of a buzzword. It sounds like just kind of an IT marketing buzzword. The fourth industrial revolution really puts this in historical context. So we are at the beginning of probably a 30 or 40-year cycle right now, just like we were with the third wave and the second wave of the Industrial Revolution. This is a big cycle that we're in. It's not going away next year. It's not going away in 18 months. Okay, this is here to stay. So it really kind of lays down the imperative that we got to start getting our minds around it, and we have to start figuring out how we are going to adapt to it. So that's kind of why I'm here. I am not a subject matter expert. I get into a lot of trouble when people ask me deep dive questions into some of these technologies. I kind of know enough to be dangerous, but I am here to give you the right attitude, the right framework for approaching this part of your career, this time that we're in, so that you can survive and flourish and find your place in it and continue doing well. So I've kind of created a 5-step process, which we'll go through, and hopefully, if time permits, we'll be done with this by 2 o'clock, if not earlier. So let's go. Let's move forward on the journey. So let's start it for starters. Okay, the first thing we want to get clear, and this is probably the most important slide of all the slides, because if you don't understand this concept, the whole rest of the talk is kind of a waste of time, which is that you really have to have an attitude that you own your own career. You are the CEO of your own career. Nobody is going to be there to help you. Nobody is going to be there to help you find your place in the world. That's up to you. Okay. Now, I spent years coaching people who were very similar to the audience that we have out there today. People who were lifelong IT professionals who were at the who had risen to management levels, into IT in one way or another. A lot of project managers, a lot of program managers, people from all different verticals, and they would come to me because I put myself out there as a coach. They were trying to get clear on how to get to the next level, how to be more fulfilled, how to get the promotion, how to brand themselves, how to market themselves. And I work with hundreds of people intimately, one-on-one. And one of the things I learned that was rather distressing was, I would say, no exaggeration, 98% of the people that I talked to had absolutely no idea what they wanted from their careers, what was even possible for them to achieve, and how to do it. Now I would say maybe 2% were had an idea, but 98% were lost, totally lost. Now, these were very successful people. Don't get me wrong. They worked for very big organizations, Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies. They had prestigious positions. They had high salaries. They had a lot of people working for them. They're putting their kids through college, they're raising families. I mean, that's how we define success. But they had no idea how to become fulfilled, get what they wanted, how to get to the next level. And they had been basically reactive their whole life. Okay, I like to say that these are they can be successful while being entirely reactive. That means that you don't really have an idea what you want or where you're going, but you're very effective at responding to whatever the immediate stimuli are in your environment from a day-to-day level. You come into work and your superiors, tell you what your marching orders are, and you've got 6 or 7 things that have to get done that day, and you do them well, and you go home, and you repeat this process, and next thing you know, 20 years goes by, and you've been pulled without really being in control of things across a path, and now you find yourself in the middle of your life lost in the dark wood, and you're kind of like, how did I get here? And where am I going? And that was really the state with most people. Now, on the other hand, I would say that of the 2% of the people that I talked to, 2% were extremely clear about what they were proactive. They had been proactive, not reactive their whole life. And they were able, and what made them different? What allowed them to be more successful as opposed to the others? Well, they had a vision. They knew what they wanted. You'd be surprised how rare that is. Most people aren't able to get clear on this. Most people either don't know what they want or they can't commit to it. They are afraid to commit to it. And as a result, they stay in reactive mode. So these more successful people, they had a vision. They knew where they wanted to be in 2 to 3 years. And then everything about they were able to do 3 things well that their reactive colleagues were not able to do at all. They were able to, first of all, learn continuously. Okay. And why do you need a vision to do that? Because if you don't know where you want to be in 2 to 3 years, you cannot identify what the knowledge gap is between the present state and the future state, which means you cannot execute on or develop a gap, a strategy to close that knowledge gap. It's like me sending you into a library with a library card without giving you any guidance at all. What are you going to read? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff to develop yourself. You need to have some type of vision about where you want to be, and that will focus you about what you need to learn. Similarly, with networking, they are able to network strategically and purposefully. Why do you need a vision to do that? Because not everybody is going to be useful for you to get where you need to be, and you need people as much as you need knowledge. Okay, and people probably is arguably the most important thing that you need to accomplish your goals in your career and to get where you need to go. And these people can't do that if you don't have that vision, because everybody is equally meaningful or equally meaningless to you in terms of getting where you need to be. And there's all kinds of reasons why you need people in your career. They serve all kinds of purposes. And finally, these people are able to actually brand themselves purposefully, because your brand is something that it's forward looking. It's supposed to sort of attract the future state to you. It's more like a vision board. And if you don't know what you want in 2 to 3 years, you cannot put that into your brand, so that which consequently will then attract the people, the resources, and and the opportunities that you need to kind of make that happen. And you'll see this with people that are in a reactive mode. Their branding on social media is very much like a resume. It's very much backwards looking. It's very much positional. Here's what my job is. They don't use it the right way because they don't know what they want to manifest. And so these are three things that really distinguish the proactive people from who own their career and have a vision from the reactive people who don't. Now, why is this so important? I mean, like I said, you could be reactive and still be successful. Well, yeah, in the old days, right? I'm what I put to you is that if you have that attitude, it may not be so useful for you or effective for you going forward because of the times that we're in. One of the things that McKinsey has said, in their report was that up to 1 billion people are going to be displaced by automation, by the year 2030. And they've also said that a third of all of the replacement jobs don't even exist yet. Okay, so we are dealing with a world that is changing so quickly that we don't even know what the jobs of 2023 or 2024 are going to be. That's how quickly things are changing. So this is the difference, is that how can you have a vision if having a vision about where you want to be in 2 to 3 years is a critical success factor, which is what I'm basically saying. How can you do that in a world that is changing that is thrashing so quickly and changing so much technologically that we don't even know what a third of the jobs are going to be from year to year? Really, that's a legitimate question. Additionally, by the way, half of all work activity, not jobs per se, but work activity, could be automated away right now using existing technology. And that gets to a lot of that gets to that RPA example, which is that it maybe just hasn't caught up to you yet. Maybe it's being employed in small ways within organizations, but sooner or later, half of all existing work activity, including half of your own, is probably susceptible to automation. So that's a double whammy. Not only do we not know what the work of the future is going to be next year or even 2 years out, but half of the things that we currently do are probably going to be rendered are going to be automated in some way, within the immediate future. It just hasn't caught up to us. So this is a serious problem. The ground is shifting underneath us, and we don't really know what's on the horizon. So how can you be proactive? I mean, if that's really the key part of success here is being proactive. So that's really a big question. So a couple of, I don't have a clear cut answer for you about this, but I'm gonna try to answer some of your objections and give you some rules of thumb here, which is that, it's okay to have goals knowing that they are going to change. That's okay. The bottom line is this: you have to put a flag in the ground. You have to say, look, the world is changing. I don't know what the jobs of the future are going to be. I don't know where my industry is going to be in 2 to 3 years, but I have to take my best guess about everything I know about technology and about the industry and about myself. And I have to basically use my best guess to say, this is where I think things are going to be, and this is where I want to be in 2 to 3 years, because that will give you something to work towards. You just have to understand that as you work towards these goals and you gather more information about the world and about the marketplace and about technology and even about yourself, that you are going to refine those goals, and your goals are going to shift and they're going to change because they're part of this dialectic. They're always just provisional to allow you to move forward. You may never reach the flag. You may never achieve the goal. That doesn't mean that you're a failure. That just means that you have been willing to continually update your vision and your goals based on all the information that you're gathering. And so that but as a result, you're learning more about yourself, you're learning more about the technology, you're learning more about the world, you're gathering work experience, and you're becoming a more sophisticated person and a more relevant and more marketable person. If you don't put a flag in the ground because you say you don't have knowledge about the future, you're not moving forward towards anything. And that's a deadly place to be, because when the revolution really truly hits, those people are going to be lost. They really won't be able to adapt. Whereas those of you who've actually started moving forward and refining your vision and objectives based on this information are going to be in the game. Okay, and you will, as a result, be able to pick up the pieces from all of the people in the population that have been able to do that. So you have to be willing to have goals that shift and change and are refined and not worry about that. That allows you to learn, it allows you to network with people, and it also allows you to brand purposefully. And again, I want to emphasize this, and we'll get to this at the end of the talk, which is that your brand really isn't your resume. A resume is backwards looking. Your brand has to basically be forward looking about where you want to be. And as such, you have to be willing to update your brand just like you update your goals, and you have to do it frequently. You have to tune it and train it and tweak it just like you do everything else, so that it represents at any given time your best guess for where you think you want to be and how you can put your best face forward to represent that. So this is all what it means to be proactive. And this is the reason why proactive people, I feel, are going to be at an enormous advantage relative to the reactive folks, and that the reactively successful strategies aren't really going to work anymore. So that's a strong part of the core of this presentation. Now, that being said, okay, that's sort of the opening, my opening pitch here. That being said, let's get into now let's get into the real deal here, okay? Which we're talking about fourth industrial revolution, digital technology. You're looking at all those technologies, and it's kind of overwhelming, right? I mean, there's like 12 or 13 different technologies. And in fact, if you think about the combinatorial mathematics of all that, it's almost astronomical. If you did like a 12 or 13 factorial, about how many different ways these things can combine. And if you looked at a 12 or 13 factorial with all of those technologies, and then you threw in all of the different industries and verticals that are out there, you can see just how disruptive and mind-boggling this is. Now, the biggest risk is this: you don't want to start with the technology. Okay, there's a old saying, it served me very well in life, which is that there is no such thing as a technology project. There are only business projects. Okay, so technology is always everywhere, only an enabler of business value. Okay, nobody does technology projects for the sake of doing technology. As such, it's very important to start where you are from a perspective of business value. Now, there's all different types of people that are in the audience today that are listening to this and that may listen to the recording. I would say that 100% of you are in IT. Some of you have, you work for consulting firms, and as a result of that, you have clients from all different verticals and industries, and you've worked on all kinds of different projects over the course of 20 or so years from different industries and verticals. But some of you, work for fairly traditional, Fortune 1000 companies, and you've been solidly in one vertical maybe for 10 years or 15 years, and it might be pharma, it could be the financial services industry, it could be insurance. And what I'm saying to you, and that's really most of you, you find the vertical that you're in, identify the vertical where you have vertical expertise beyond, your technical skills and your managerial skills, and try to understand that in your industry better. Understand your market and think about how business value is currently being created. Where is the business value? What is the business value that differentiates your vertical in the marketplace? What is the business value that's being created by the projects that you're on within that vertical? How is technology enabling that business value? And then how might new technologies create new business value within that construct? Okay, because if you try to think about how business values about these technologies in themselves, you are going to drown in a sea of complexity without any guardrails. You are just going to drown in a sea of complexity. You need these guardrails to channel your thinking. So start where you are, know your market, know yourself, know your industry, understand how business value is created, and ask good questions about how new business value could be created with these new technologies. Now, of course, that does presuppose that you have to know a little bit about these technologies just to ask those questions. And I'll get to that in the heuristic step number 4, okay, which is later in the presentation, which is the concept of what it means to know enough. Very important, okay? But for now, let's put that on hold and just imagine that you do know enough. And so you want to ask good questions, such as, how might technology X combine with technology Y in such a way, say, to, create new business value within the field that I'm in? How might a startup be able to come? This is another important question, especially if 3 out of 10 businesses are going to go extinct. When you're working for one of these companies, you got to protect yourself. How might a startup be able to come in and use one or more of these technologies to steal market share rapidly from our company and render us, irrelevant and obsolete? That's a big risk right now, because with the cloud and the direction that the cloud has taken, pretty much everything is from a computing perspective is available, and IT perspective is available as a service. I mean, everything is available as a service. It used to be in the old days that you had to build your own data center, and that was a huge barrier to entry into any kind of market. And most of us will work for larger organizations, especially if you're project managers, your traditional rank and file project managers. And we tend these big Fortune 1000 companies, they tend to have a lot of market share. They're slow, they're clunky, they're bureaucratic, they're not very innovative. They take their market share for granted. And you don't, without having that firewall of the data, which is the requirement to build a data center in order to basically run a business. You could be two kids with an idea, in a coffee shop somewhere in Silicon Valley. You meet the right person, you get some seed capital, and you're off and running, and you're using the cloud, paying as you go for all of your needs. Okay, and that compresses the time to market and allows people to do rapid prototyping, rapid market testing, and to potentially come up with viable competitive ideas that are going to put your business at risk. So you need to be aware, you need to think about that in terms of what are the other guys doing? What are the new guys doing? Being able to use some of these resources that will allow them to sort of get to market fast and do some experiments. And then you also want to ask the question, how might X and Y come together in such a way that it would render my job obsolete? Or especially, when you consider the fact that 50% of all the work that's being done out there today across all industries and all verticals is potentially automated, you need to ask yourself that, because you don't want to become redundant with the technology. That's a very dangerous place to be doing something that can be automated by a machine in some way. It's a very dangerous place to be. So these are the survival questions that you need to be able to ask yourself right from the get-go, starting within the context of the business that you're in and the job that you do. Now, it all sounds very abstract, so I'll give you some examples so that are more concrete. So it was quite a long time ago, actually. At this point, I think it was almost probably 4 years ago, which is like an eternity in technology. And we had a client of ours that was in sort of hospital or healthcare of some way, and they were very concerned about how the market for diagnostics, some of these new technological trends were going to actually disrupt the market for diagnostics, and they wanted us to help them think through this. They specifically were thinking about how, with advances in the cloud and with the Internet of Things and potentially the 5G and the potential coming 5G revolution and the sensor revolution, you could have a world where you had biometrics in clothing, internet-enabled clothing with biometrics in clothing, or just even if it's just biometric, patches that go under the skin, which is what you have with some of these glucose monitors now. Monitoring all kinds of biometrics in real time, uploading that to the cloud. The cloud is able to process it instantaneously, and if you ever have any of these measurable markers cross a certain threshold, your doctor's immediately notified, you're immediately notified, your insurance company is immediately notified. I mean, we're sort of seeing this with the Fitbit revolution and whatnot. But this was about 5 years ago. They were very early on. They wanted us to sort of think through this, maybe build some prototypes, work through some of the technical questions with them. And that's a really great example of what I'm talking about, which is that they were concerned about a very specific niche. They were thinking about how business value is currently created and how that could be disrupted by new technologies. And then they worked with a partner. They recognized, by the way, that they didn't have that expertise. They worked with a partner that helped them think through this and help identify where they maybe should be spending their time and doing a little bit more research. And that's a wonderful example about how businesses and also individuals can think about these questions in a way that channels them. Okay, this is a narrowing exercise. This is almost, I can't even use this example anymore, because it's ancient history at this point. I mean, this was all very exciting 5 years ago when we were talking about preventative healthcare models, technology enabling new preventative healthcare models, and now this is almost obsolete. We're talking about predictive healthcare, which is the combination of computing power and nanotechnology and genomics, being able to actually tell you, what's going to happen before it even happens, based on your genome. I mean, we're in a whole different world right now, but that's how quickly things change. There's another way that you can look at that you can look at this. The previous example is very, it's challenging. It's very blue sky. You're imagining things that don't exist yet. That's not everybody can do that. But you can also look at, existing cases where new technology has been disruptive, has been proven in some other industry or field, and you can ask yourself, are there analogs for this within the niche that you're in, within the vertical that you're in? So we're all familiar with Uber and what Uber did to the transportation industry, to the taxi industry, and you could sort of ask yourself, you could say, well, is there could the underlying concept that it is embedded in the Uber business model be applicable within other businesses in some way or another? I mean, I've gone to enough lectures, I've heard people use the word Uber as a verb often enough to know that a lot of people do this. They talk about being Ubered. Okay, and so you can think through that, and that's a little bit easier of a stretch. Okay, because you don't have to imagine something new. You can just say, can this be extended? So, in our case, we're a managed IT services firm. We provide a lot of high-end, managed IT services, but we also, a large part of our business is just traditional staffing, which is where a client will come to us and they'll, ask for, us to provide certain resources that have certain skills. And while I would like to believe that we provide a lot of value beyond just being a body shop in that case, in the sense that, we take on a lot of risk, we streamline the process for them, we protect them from certain, legal and regulatory issues. We also have long-term trusted relationships with them that turn into other types of projects. So we're not just, providing bodies when they just need bodies. We can move across a spectrum of risk where we take on risks for them, including huge multi-million-dollar projects that go on for decades. So, there's all kinds of things that we do for our clients, and this is just part of the value add. And so while I would like to believe that, this type of a relationship is immune to technological change, the reality is that things are moving so quickly in terms of computing power, automation, and AI that a lot of those issues are going to be streamlined by technology at some point. And you could have an Uber we already are talking about that with the gig economy, people being matched up with their employers, but seeing this within a world such as IT staffing is something that is quite possible. It is quite realistic. It could happen within 3 to 4 years. And if half of your revenue comes from that business model, then you need to understand that. And there's things that you can do to think through that. You can think about, is anybody out there developing a solution like this? Is there anybody out in the West Coast that's gotten funding for something like this? Or any of the big technology companies developing a solution like this? Is this something that we could develop? Could we develop some prototypes and sort of try to get in front of it so that we can sort of stay ahead of the curve? There's a lot that you can do, but again, you're looking at it within the context of your own business model and the way that you create business value for your clients, or how your projects create value, and that's what's narrowing your focus. That's the discipline. And of course, another thing is that when it comes to I'm sorry, again, I apologize, but the builds are not working because we're in WebEx, and so the picture is being blacked out here. But what I was trying to show you was that there are also, if you're looking to sort of make a difference in terms of using these new technologies in a way that creates new business value, you can also reach for the low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of already existing use cases that are well documented, low risk, relatively easy to implement, proven use cases for some of these existing technologies. And if you can familiarize yourself with sort of them, you can sort of see what might be appropriate for you and your organization at any given time. And within AI, it might be stuff like voice assisted technologies or chatbots. These are things that are relatively straightforward. They're well documented. And so, it doesn't have to be something new. It doesn't have to be a new application. It can be an existing proven use case. And that's a great place to kind of get some traction. And then, when all said and done, no matter what you want to do when it comes to digital transformation, you're going to need your data to be centralized and cleansed and migrated in some way. And so when all said and done, if you want to move forward on this path and keep yourself moving forward and staying relevant, one place to start might be getting involved in data migration initiatives, because, again, low risk, But it's something that's going to enable all of these other initiatives in the future. So it's a place that you can position yourself and get involved again to stay relevant. Now, just a little note here from my friend Paul Klappis. He says that there's actually, just within AI, which is just one of these areas that we're seeing growth in, we've got $50 billion in corporate investment. That is, and where the project failure rates are actually higher than the failure rates for traditional projects. And here's some more good news for folks, which is that the reason for this in his research, it's not because of this material is inherently more complicated or more difficult technically. It's basic project management. It's the fact that these projects don't have clear goals, don't have clear charters, no clear requirements, no clear risk mitigation. In other words, you do not have to be a technical expert in AI in order to be successful in managing and implementing an AI project. You simply have to understand the good principles of project management. For whatever reason, this is not being this is being lost on these projects. And so that's another area that you need to keep in mind, which is don't be intimidated by this material. It's good project management will go a long way to allowing you to be successful. And then again, we'll get to this in slide number 4, which is that, well, then how much do I need to know about a lot of this? And we'll talk about that later. So this is, for those who aren't familiar, this is Gary Kasparov. This is, at one point in time, he was the greatest chess player in the world. This is Gary in 1997, losing a game of chess to IBM's Deep Blue computer, which is something that they said was never going to happen. It wasn't possible, and of course it did happen, and didn't just happen. It happened 25 years ago, almost to the day, which was, interestingly enough, that was the year I started with CAI. That's how long I've been at CAI. You can see Gary doesn't look very happy about this. Now, I guess the moral of this slide and of this story is that if a technology is coming into being that is going to be able to do your job better and faster and more efficiently than you can, don't fight it, okay? It is a losing battle, okay? You cannot fight it. At some point, you have to see the writing on the wall, okay? And the reason why is because you don't want to position yourself as being redundant with technology. You cannot win that battle, but you will be replaced. But just like Gary was replaced by a computer. But the good news is this: the good news is that with everything that I know about computing power and the evolution of AI and technologies, the machines, and let's just call them the machines because it's a good way of anthropomorphizing the enemy in some way and personifying the enemy. So it's a monolithic thing. We'll just say the machines. It's us versus the machines. But the machines are nowhere near being able to develop anything close to what we would consider emotional intelligence. And that is a huge comparative advantage for us. Which is that if we just have to refocus, we have to reconceptualize what our value is to the enterprise, because it may not be IQ anymore. It may not be our technical skill set. It's not going to be anything that can be automated or optimized with AI or automation or computing power in some way, is not where we want to position ourselves. We want to focus on the softer side, because that's where what computers can't do. That's where we have a comparative advantage. And that's good. That's good news, because there is so much that falls underneath the rubric of emotional intelligence that we can all work on in terms of making ourselves more marketable and more valuable to our organizations. It's stuff like being a person of integrity, being a person of trust, knowing how to listen, and working on having better empathy with people, being able to collaborate. I mean, in many ways, collaboration is a function of all of this stuff put together. But I'm pretty sure that as the world becomes more awash in computing power and AI becomes embedded everywhere, and all of this technology becomes more dial tone and seamless, that all of us are going to be expected and asked to work on projects that are global in nature, with people, forming teams quickly with people that we've never worked with before, that represent all different ethnicities and philosophical and religious and political perspectives. And we're going to be expected to develop rapport with them quickly, to figure out how to get something done quickly. And then we're going to break up, and we're going to be expected to do it all over again with new people from all over the world. And this is going to be the landscape of project management going forward, because the world, of course, is going to be made smaller from all this. And those amongst you who have high EQ and have the ability to do all these things and to be effective with other people interpersonally are going to be very valuable to the enterprise. And I will also throw in a little bonus tip here, which is that for those of you who are project managers in the audience and who are PMP members, is that the PMI is a fantastic organization for this, because the PMI is a global organization which is very well organized, which people are very proud of their affiliations with, and they put it out in their social media profiles. And and it's very important, if you want to survive, that you don't just have an effective network of people that know who you are and are familiar with your brand and your value statement locally. And you need to work on developing a global network, and the PMI becomes your entree, because as you connect with people that you don't know from around the world on the strength of your personal brand, okay, which is, again, we'll get to that later, which is going to be projecting your, where you want to be in 2 to 3 years. People are going to be likely to accept your invite if they see that you have this common professional affiliation, being a PMP and being part of the PMI. And so that will open doors for you and allow you to build a global network. And I believe that's going to become increasingly important as we get pulled into these global collaborations going forward. But it's not just EQ, thank God. EQ is a huge subject in itself. People have written books about it. And of course, everybody knows that, all the white papers that have been written for 15 years from CIOs saying that this was one of the highest valued skill sets that they've been looking for. So it's nothing new. The EQ has been in demand for a long time. We've recognized that it's going to become increasingly more valuable, is my point. But there are other aspects, other areas where we have a comparative advantage relative to the machines. And these are things like our imagination, our creativity. There's a very important concept which I call transdisciplinarity, which basically means our ability to be interested in different subject areas that are sort of on the surface disparate. And because of that, we're able to sort of glean insights from these disparate domains and pull them together into in new creative ways to see things, to see opportunities, to see value. The computers, even the most powerful supercomputers, are famous for being single domain. They are very, very good at doing one thing and doing it faster than anything else. Okay, even Watson, IBM's Watson, is which is deployed primarily at the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic to sort of is focused almost entirely on doing, diagnosing human illnesses like cancer screenings and stuff like that. And Watson can process 1 million medical textbooks per second. That's how fast it is. And it's still learning. They're still working on it. They've got problems with it, but they basically test it. They have it diagnose problems, and they'll have a team of doctors do a diagnosis, and they can sort of see, who's more accurate, the computer or these doctors. And I mean, pretty much, I think Watson has like an 85% success rate with basically beating the doctors at this point. So it's not perfect yet. But the point is, that's a very specialized, very specific task that it's doing. There is no such thing. Even though you might read about it and you might see it in the movies, there is no such thing as a general purpose thinking supercomputer. Okay, that's not what AI is. That's not what AI can do right now, and it will probably never be able to do that in our working lifetimes. When Watson famously played Jeopardy, and beat Ken Jennings, it was a completely different machine. They had to build an entirely different knowledge database for the Watson machine learning algorithms in order to allow it to do that. It wasn't the same computer. So there is no single general purpose thinking machine out there. And as long as that is a fantasy and a fiction from science fiction, again, we have a huge comparative advantage, because one of the things about the brain and about humans that makes us unique is that we can handle mastery of multiple domains, and more importantly, we're able to sort of generate insights from them and pull them together. So when you think about, say, Airbnb and Uber, which were like the classic examples of disruption, everybody's familiar with them. They're easy to understand use cases. Did these people actually create anything new? I mean, was there any big technological breakthrough that these people came up with? I mean, no, not really. I mean, everything that they used to build those businesses was already in existence. all the technology was already out there. It's kind of like the drone. When the drone, all the technology for the drone was already drones were already pre-existing. Somebody just figured out how to kind of put them together, in a unique configuration to create this new application, which has all this value to it. It was the same thing with Uber and Airbnb. Nothing new was created. Somebody basically, saw across multiple domains and said, you know what, if you take technology X and you take technology Y and you take technology Z and you bring it together in this way within this specific industry, which was transportation or perhaps lodging, which is what we were talking about in the previous slide, okay? How to bring new technologies together within a certain niche in order to create what? New business value. And is there enough business value that will be created that we can grab market share and build a new business? If it's yes, then let's go for it. And that was basically the origination of these businesses. Now, of course, executing on that is really where that's really the hard part. But but fundamentally speaking, it was an act of creativity, of disciplinary insight and imagination. And that's we have to basically develop that part of ourselves within the enterprise. We have to be those types of people that are willing to think creatively, to use our creation to imagine things. That's going to make us more valuable and more relevant as we move into this world of experimentation, with all these new technologies. And it's being able to communicate, having influence socially, because nothing gets done if you don't have influence over people, which of course is again a function of EQ. Being able to think critically, having an entrepreneurial mindset. Okay, this is the stuff where we have a return, where our employers will have a return on investment. These are the things that are going to be valuable. They might call this stuff in the past, they might have called this soft skills. There's nothing soft about any of this. This is where we're going to have valuable. Again, we're going to have to figure out a way to work in a hybrid way with these technologies where we create a higher level of synergistic value. And I'll give you an example. So when Gary Kasparov lost the game of computer to Deep Blue, they went back to the drawing board and the technicians, and they tried to find new ways, configurations that would be optimal. And they discovered that the Deep Blue computer could be beaten if you had two grandmaster chess players working together with a computer. In that configuration, they were actually able to beat Deep Blue. And so the moral of the story is that we've got to be, technology isn't going to replace us as long as we are willing to identify where we have comparative advantage relative to the technology, and then be willing to work together in new configurations with technology where we provide a different type of value to the enterprise, and those are the people who are going to be successful. But again, you know, this is probably the most important slide, because we're in a knowledge economy, obviously, and this stuff is pretty heavy. We're talking heady. We're talking about technology, new technology, and no matter what we're talking about, whether it's working in a hybrid way with technology, imagining what the new business value is that could be created, you do have to have some type of knowledge about these technologies. The question is, what do you need to know? How much do you need to know? What's realistic? And I'm here to say the good news is not a lot. Okay. In fact, I would just say the first rule, fundamental rule, is that you have to allow yourself to be curious. One of the things that has gotten beaten out of us by a combination of, the educational system that we grew up in, and also the corporate workforce, is that nobody has ever put a premium on just the virtue of being curious. Okay, from the very beginning, when we're in school, we're kind of, we inherited an educational system that was all about moving people from. It was part of the first industrial revolution. It's what it was. It was part of moving an artifact that represented our need to move people from the countryside, from farms, into the cities, where they could basically be factory workers, or they could work for the administrative bureaucratic state. And that meant that we had to be able to do writing and reading and arithmetic and follow orders. And it was very, very streamlined around that. And so curiosity wasn't, there was no premium on that. And it's similar in a corporate environment. When you take on a job, I mean, how many people have felt guilty being on the job and reading something or doing something that maybe wasn't directly related to, the tasks that, your supervisor had immediately given to you, right? or that wasn't perhaps, or maybe you felt a little bit uncomfortable about spending too much time on something that wasn't sort of directly related to your career, in some way. Well, I'm here to say that we've got to overcome all of that programming, because the most successful organizations and the most successful individuals are going to be those people that primarily are filled with the joy of curiosity, and that allow themselves to explore that, because nobody knows what the future is going to look like. But I'll say this, if you know a little bit about a lot of things and you allow yourself to learn a little bit, a lot of things, even if you don't necessarily see what the direct connection is right now, you are going to be very well positioned in 2, 3, or 4 years when the storm hits, because you're going to have basically a kind of a technological literacy, or also a kind of a mental model of the world that other people won't have. So it's very valuable. Organizations should be encouraging this. I know that in our organization, our company, they encouraged this like 4 or 5 years ago. They basically said, we want you to be curious. We need you to know a little bit about a lot of things, because they knew that that's the groundwork for any kind of innovation. Going into the future, they gave us these subscriptions to these book summarization services. They created book clubs. They merely made an effort. So that, in some ways, that has to come from the top, but there's also a part of this that comes from within. You have to sort of allow yourself to be curious, and you have to understand that it is the generalists who are going to be the ones that are best positioned and who are the most valuable. There's a great danger in times like this of specialization, because if you put too much energy into deep expertise in any one area, by the time you achieve that expertise, the world may have changed so dramatically that either that technology is obsolete, your level of expertise is irrelevant, or there's technology that can actually do the job that you thought that you were preparing for. That's how quickly things are changing. I mean, a kind of a prosaic example of this might be, somebody goes to college and gets a liberal arts degree, doesn't know what job they're going to have. Another person goes to a 2-year school in order to learn how to read X-rays, because they know that that's at least a job that's pretty concrete, and they'll be able to get a return on their educational investment. And then the X-ray technician finds out that, in fact, there are no jobs for reading X-rays, because all that's been taken over by machine learning algorithms. And so, that's an example of a risk that you have, and you have that across everything. Okay, so it's the curious that will survive. It is the generalists who will survive. It is those amongst you who know a little bit about a lot of things. You're going to be very well positioned to see connections and to form mental models. So this is the concept of what I mean to know enough. You want to just know enough that you have a kind of there are two basic things that you want to be able to accomplish. One is, you want to understand, I mean, fundamentally, most of the time we are using technology. Okay, we're not necessarily, most of us are, we're also creating applications of these technologies, but we're also users of technologies. So we always want to be able to understand how we can leverage and use technology in order to do our jobs better. And that is a certain type of knowledge that we can have. For instance, everybody knows how to use email. Nobody understands the underlying mathematics behind email that make it possible. That is an unnecessary level of knowledge for the purposes of effectively using this technology. Okay, that's an example of knowing enough. And there's another aspect to knowing enough, which is understanding what are all the potential use cases or applications of these technologies, because that's where the future resides. That's where the opportunity resides. And that's where those of us who are in IT or who are in project management, that's where we're going, or even, business requirements, or even if we're at the executive level, that's where we are going to be active, which is imagining how these technologies can be used to create applications. And again, that is a different level of knowledge. You do not need to understand how to program in Python, how to program machine and create and tune and train machine learning models in order to be successful at managing an AI project, or to be successful at envisioning what the relevant applications are for AI within your industry. What do you need to know? Well, you probably need to know what all the common use cases are. You probably need to know about what are the resources and tools that are available out there. for people that are working on these projects. And you probably have to know about what are the skill sets that your technical people are going to need on those projects. You need to know enough to find those people. Okay, that's a totally different level of knowledge. You might not be able to sort of interview them technically or understand what goes on in a technical interview, but you need to know that you need a data scientist and why you might need a data scientist. And you might need to know that you need a Python programmer and why you might need a Python programmer. And you might need to know what's available from the cloud, and etc. Different level of knowledge. But above all, I mean, I would say, that being said, it's the use cases that are going to be the most valuable for you in terms of knowing enough. Uh, Nobody needs to go back to school to sort of develop this level of knowledge. All of this can be attainable online. YouTube is free. I mean, anything can be found on YouTube. You can search on 2-minute lectures, 5-minute lectures, 30-minute lectures. I would avoid going into, right off the bat, there's plenty of websites where you can purchase for, $30 or $50 or $10, maybe like an 8-hour course, in artificial intelligence, to give you an example. And, that's great. Okay. For those of you who have the time, but I would discourage you from doing that to start. I would start with, getting overviews that are maybe 5 minutes in length, an overview of all of these technologies. And you can find all that on YouTube, and it's free. It won't cost you anything. And that's how you build your technological literacy and your mental models of what the world is this world is going to look like in 2 or 3 years. Also, find mentors. One of the great things about mentors, about other people, if they're subject matter experts, is that they have already achieved that level of knowledge. So if they are people that you interact with personally through work, that you want to identify those people and you want to spend time with them and you want to talk to them and find out what you need to learn. And also you can use LinkedIn to find these people that you don't necessarily know. If somebody is a subject matter expert in, quantum computing or in the blockchain applications or in autonomous vehicles or in deep learning, okay, they are going to have that highlighted in their social media profile, and it'll be clear whether or not they're an expert or not from how they position themselves. And if you search for people like this and you pull them into your network, one of the advantages is that these people tend to share what they know through social media. They might share articles, they might share video clips of themselves, and that becomes another very powerful way to sort of draw this knowledge to you, through your network. All very doable. In my case, I'm not trying to sell anything here, but I'm just trying to let you know, that's what I do. If you connect to me, and I would encourage you to connect to me on LinkedIn, okay? We have 2 ways that we continuously educate people about this. We have a new podcast series called True Tech Insight, where I find people that are experts in all of the technologies that are changing our world right now, and I interview them. I interview them for 30 minutes, questions that you would probably have, or the same questions that I have, in an attempt to sort of build my knowledge base about what the applications of the future are, and all the various issues that are surrounding it. And we post these for free on LinkedIn. So and there are plenty of people like me that do the same thing. If you follow somebody like me, you find somebody me on LinkedIn and you follow them, you're going to get this stream in your social media inbox of useful clips. And we also have a YouTube channel. It's all free. And we have the great IT professional, which is why you're here today. We do 3 long form 90-minute discussions every week with subject matter experts on all kinds of topics. Yesterday we did one on quantum computing, an incredibly important topic, and we post these in our library, and you can explore that on the greatpro.org site. So use LinkedIn by all means. You can find, I'm one of many people that are out there. Now, all that being said, okay, we talked about owning your own career. We talked about the challenges of having a vision. We talked about having that, provisional goals that allow you to move forward. We talked about looking at technology within the context of business value and within the industries that you're in, and understanding questions related to business value. We talked about working in hybrid with technology and identifying areas of comparative advantage where you're, identifying your human qualities, your more human qualities that haven't been valued in the past. And we talked about what it means to know enough to, maybe to build mental models, focusing on use cases and applications primarily, and sort of expanding from there. We talked about all that, and that's all well and good, but ultimately, you're going to get the most bang in your career if you get involved in projects in the real world, in your company. Okay, it's one thing to kind of do all this and have this attitude, that this right attitude and this good discipline. It's another thing that if you're actually involved in these projects, that's where you're going to learn, where you're going to fail, and you're going to get experience. Okay, and so, but one of the things that you're going to come up against, especially those of you who work for larger organizations, is there's this thing called the corporate immune system. Okay, which I'm sure you're familiar. You may not know the term, but you're familiar with the concept, which is that most businesses, big businesses, they don't like to take risks on new ideas that are unproven. They don't like to take chances. The people that are managing some of these parts of the business, they tend to be senior. They're like in their 50s. They're approaching retirement. They have their eyes focused on their pension or on retirement. They don't want to rock the boat, too much. And it's very hard to get these people to take chances, especially when it's in the business's core competency. That is like a sacred zone. Okay, that's how the money gets made. They don't want to take chances on new things. And so it's going to be hard for people to find opportunities in that type of environment. And so you have to learn how to deal with this. And one of the best things that you can do, the best pieces of advice, is that you don't confront the core. Okay, you don't look to do these types of projects inside your business's core competency. You try to go to the edge. Okay, you try to go to the edge outside the core where the stakes aren't as high, where people have a higher tolerance for risk, and that's where you can experiment with projects like this. And so you want to find people who are visionaries, who are maybe on the edge, and sort of align with them in some way. And another thing, and that's where you want to do this work. Now, you're also going to have to sort of you're also going to have to, in some cases, be a lobbyist and be an advocate for this, within your company, and that also is going to presuppose that you know a little bit about this stuff, and you may actually have to educate some of the people around you. You may have to educate some of your upper managers and supervisors, and that's another advantage when you start to build these mental models and learn a little bit about these technologies and about the applications that are being successful out there in the real world, where you can get other people excited about it. They may just not understand. They may not know. One thing that you can do either as an individual or even you can get your company to do it, and we did this where I work, is that you can form task forces. So these are people that come together from different parts of the business. Okay, so you have this kind of synergy. I was put on a task force where I had people from accounting, I had people from corporate IT, I had people from R&D, and we actually had the founder of the company as well in that group. And we had a task force where we would basically brainstorm, use cases based on what we were reading. We had we would share articles. Okay, that came from the found. We would share articles with each other that we would discuss. And then company wide, we actually had kind of like a subject matter book club where we would where there were books that we would read, and we would sort of share what we knew about those books. And so this is very stimulative. It breaks down silos. It gets everybody talking, and everybody can kind of get educated in the process. Now, additionally, you want to use LinkedIn internally. It's not just about finding people who can help educate you. Okay, it's also about how you're positioning yourself inside your organization, because if you do complete a course, say like a 5-hour overview, again, I'm emphasizing the overview classes because they're the most useful, of some technology, you're probably going to get some type of certificate, especially if it's not YouTube, if it's something you pay for. And you want to post that, and you want to highlight that on your brand and put it out there so that the people in your organization see that you're taking a lead, okay, in this. And that's also going to open up doors and open up opportunities. And your supervisors are going to be looking for people inside the organization that are doing that. Okay. And that's also potentially going to bring you into these opportunities. But again, not all companies are interested in this. Not all companies are going to have the culture, this type of culture. And if 3 out of 10 businesses aren't going to survive this revolution, and you're not able to get traction or to change the way people think or to change the company culture, and get real world experience, maybe, I hate to say this, maybe you want to look around for other companies that are a little more innovative and a little more experimental, because that's where you're going to get the experience. And you got to watch out for yourself. You're the CEO of you. And so you need to take that responsibility upon yourself. Just to kind of summarize, again, the builds aren't here. We were going to work this one thing or another. I just want to talk about I wanted to talk about some of the use cases with some of these technologies, just to kind of get you excited and let you understand that, this is easy to kind of get your head around. You just have to be kind of curious and let yourself imagine things. So, regarding the blockchain, I mean, we're kind of familiar with the blockchain, most of us, because we're familiar with crypto, because that's a speculative investment vehicle that's been in the news a lot. But what you may not understand is that crypto is just one application of this underlying blockchain technology, and there's sort of infinite potential applications of it. And what you need to understand fundamentally is that the blockchain is a kind of a decentralized, that's the key word, unhackable, immutable ledger. That's sort of the analogy they make, that disintermediates trusted third parties like banks. Okay, in the case of currency. So anytime with money, we have transactions. There's a debit and a credit side of the ledger, and the bank is kind of maintaining all these records to determine who has how much money and who's able to give money to whom. And boy, that's a lot of work, right? For the banks. It makes banks pretty powerful, and that's what it means to be a trusted third party intermediary. That's what a bank is. And you don't need a trusted third party intermediary, because the blockchain can basically is immutable and hackable, has perfect integrity, can maintain the history of all the transactions. It's built in to the blockchain. So once you understand that, you can potentially imagine what other applications are and what they could be maybe in your industry. So that when I first heard about this, the very first thing I thought about was real estate. When you're closing on real estate and you have a title company that you have to work with, a title company is a trusted third-party intermediary, and they're sitting at the center of this transaction, and they have to basically make sure, they have to look at the chain of custody. It's what it is with the property. They have to make sure that you actually have the right to sell it, and that there isn't any issue in the past with somebody who had the right to sell this. So there has to be a long chain of custody, and in fact, the business is so clunky and so screwed up because the records are so bad that you have to get title insurance in the event that something goes wrong. When somebody comes back and sues you 5 years later and says, well, actually, I own the property and they didn't have the right to sell it to you. And I thought, well, what a great way, what a great application for the blockchain. What it does for banks, it can do for title companies. But that's just, I mean, we could spend a whole session just talking about possible applications. You've got voting. Voting, what's the biggest problem in voting right now? Chain of custody issues. I mean, isn't that what we're all fighting about? Which is that there's no proper chain of custody from some of these elections. Okay, that is solved with an immutable, unhackable ledger, sort of like the blockchain. You've got supply chain management with food and pharma. You've got all these complicated parties that are part of a supply chain, and you can have a complete and accurate record of every ingredient, the provenance of every ingredient that went into any product, whether it was labor or whether it was an actual ingredient. It could be vitamins, it could be food. People care that. They care about, like, was my coffee made with fair labor? Well, you can track all the hours of labor and where it came from and how much they got paid. Same thing with drugs. You can know exactly what parts of the vitamin came from China, what parts came from Kansas. Complete visibility and transparency, unhackable into the complete supply chain. So again, it's about the use cases. It's about imagining, what the applications are. 3D printing. We've all seen that house that got printed in 24 hours. And kind of what that tells us is that houses are software. Anything that can be put into a digital file can now be printed. It could be body parts. That's a use case. Fully functioning cars, restaurant meals, customized pharmaceutical drugs that are customized to your genome, clothing. I mean, these are all the future applications of 3D printing. I mean, they're already printing body parts. That's already happening. That's not in the future. There are applications for this in almost every industry, and it also reinforces this axiom that everything is now information technology, and that means that everything in our world, whether it's physical, even everything that's physical, is subject to Moore's law in one way or another, which just speeds up the kind of rate of acceleration. You could in the Internet of Things. That's a example of the physical internet. It's where it's where your coffee pot is talking to your thermostat, is talking to your car, is talking to your alarm clock, etc. That's an example of household Internet of Things. But you also have it in the industrial world, where everything in a factory, all the machinery is kind of communicating, allows you to do preventative maintenance. Internet of Things is a critical part of the autonomous vehicle revolution because it enables what they call vehicle to everything. So it's not just vehicle to vehicle communication; it's vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to infrastructure. Um, Internet of Things enables smart cities. So there are plenty of public safety use cases, emergency services use cases, public infrastructure management use cases. Basically anything that and the result of Internet of Things is that you're going to have sensors everywhere. I mean, they're just going to be embedded in the sidewalk, embedded in clothing. Everything is going to be interconnected, and this is going to pose enormous issues in terms of security, and also great opportunities for those of you. One thing that you can easily add to your bag of tricks to stay relevant in this new world is to pick up a certificate for cybersecurity and to sort of add that to your expertise, because the world that we're moving into is a world of what I call total interconnectedness, and it's going to be huge security issues. So anybody who adds that to the mix is going to be on very good ground, and also lots of opportunities for data analytics and extracting value from data, because all of these sensors are going to create massive and massive amounts of data, and which, by the way, is also going to fuel AI to get to the next level. One thing that you may not realize with AI is that we got where we are because of the mobile phone revolution. Actually, it was the mobile phone revolution which actually just exponentially increased the amount of data, which is what, and all the multimedia that's out there, which is, and it's the deep learning algorithms, they progress by getting access to larger and larger and larger data sets. And so you're going to see this continual progress in AI, as we collect more, more and more data. 5G is a huge critical success factor for everything that we want to do. It's basically the backbone of this entire new world that we're living into, because almost everything is going to require the kind of low latency, high bandwidth that only 5G can provide, whether we're talking about smart city use cases with smart cities. The augmented reality, the metaverse, is completely contingent on 5G, okay, to be able to have an effective experience with that much data and that many sensors going on. You're going to need 5G. Also, anything involving remote control work, remote control surgery, the whole vehicle to everything revolution, Internet of Bodies, which is basically Internet of Things but inside your body. Anything that requires low latency, high bandwidth, remote control precision, life and death accuracy is going to be contingent on 5G in some way. And they're even now talking about 6G, and that's how fast the world moves, which is, 5G, you're getting a gigabyte per second. It's 6G, you're getting a terabyte per second. And that's going at that point, you're going to have full sensory immersive experiences that are indistinguishable from reality. And I think that's where the metaverse really takes off, which is like 10 years from now, frankly. I think that's actually quite far off. But that's what we have to look forward to. All of these technologies are you can see how they're all interrelated, and they all kind of fuel each other. Nanotechnology is something that you may not be hip to, but that's basically technology that's at the level of 1/1000th of a meter. So to put that in perspective, 100,000 nanometers is a human hair. This allows us to build molecular-sized robots, artificial blood cells, new materials like graphene. It intersects with the Internet of Bodies, with genomics, with preventative healthcare. It opens doors for new paradigms of computing, such as biological computing and DNA computing. That's where we use biological processes to both for computing and storage. And this is where, again, we will see Moore's law, continue to move forward, because there will be new paradigms. I mentioned the metaverse. Some of the applications for the metaverse will be anything involving shopping. So house shopping, clothing shopping, car shopping, anything involving remote inspection. I have a colleague who is building metaverses in order to inspect remote oil rigs. Okay, so obviously you're going to need a lot of sensors involved in this, and you need high bandwidth. But that's basically, those are prototype projects that they're currently working on. In many ways, crypto and NFTs are increasing the business value of the business first, because they allow for something called virtual real estate. If you think that this is all futuristic, the metaverse, there are thousands of patents that are already out there with the metaverse. It's in play. Don't make the mistake, though, of thinking that this is just a Facebook application. It's not. Facebook tried to lay claim to it by rebranding themselves as Meta, but the fact is, everybody's working on metaverses. Okay, it's the technology's been out there for a while. It's not just going to be Facebook. book. We are running out of time, so I want to mention one final thing, which is about quantum computing. You may think that this is science fiction. It's not. Every major cloud provider has some type of quantum computer that is currently under development. This is a groundbreaking technology for a lot of reasons, but the primary thing is that when a quantum computer stabilizes and gets properly commercialized, you're not going to have these in your pocket, by the way. I mean, all of this is going to be available as a service, pay as you go, which is why the cloud companies that are leading the way, you're going to have computers that are 1 million times more powerful and faster than the world's most powerful supercomputers. And that obviously is going to have huge disruptive impacts on our world and on the nature of business and on the nature of jobs. It's going to be jet fuel for AI and for deep learning. It is going to, unfortunately, probably change the game. It's probably going to create huge advantages for only for those people who can afford access to the quantum computers. But it's something to keep an eye on because it is so disruptive. A quantum computer could effectively, if put in the wrong hands, could destroy all the world's current RSA encryption, which keeps all your passwords secure instantaneously. That's a problem. So you're going to see quantum computing is going to lead to an evolution in new forms of security to kind of outwit it. That's already kind of in process right now as people are trying to prepare and develop them forms of security that are going to basically be unbreakable by quantum computers. You're also going to have breakthroughs in the natural sciences, in chemistry. You may not realize this, but it's currently impossible, even with the world's most powerful supercomputers, to effectively model even the caffeine molecules in your coffee cup. That's how complex they are. So they simulate. Okay, all computers do is they simulate, and the reason is this is because fundamentally reality is quantum in nature. It is quantum in nature, and computers, even the fastest computers, are binary in nature, and so they can only approximate through models what's going on. One of the advantages of a quantum computer is that it's quantum. Okay, in nature, it is leveraging quantum principles, the quantum principles of reality, and that's going to allow it to actually create more realistic models of proteins. You can have advances in chemistry. New materials can be prototyped rapidly. There's going to be changes in climate science. Anything that requires massive amounts of computing power, for instance, any kind of predictive healthcare. Anything that's predictive in nature, huge impact from quantum computers. So it's something to kind of keep an eye on. All this stuff is obviously interconnected. It's all interrelated, and you can see why it's quite a witch's brew. But again, some basic principles just to let's step back as we close. Doesn't have to be complicated. One, you got to have an attitude of owning your own career. Okay, that's pretty basic. Okay, we want to have a goal. We want to have goals. Even if we know that the world is changing so quickly that we're not going to reach those goals, that's okay. The goals are provisional. They allow us to move forward, and we have to be willing to take what we learn from as we move forward towards these provisional goals to both refine our goals, refine our brand, refine our strategy, and to keep moving forward. Okay, always start where you are. Start with business value. Don't start with technology. Start by asking good questions about how technology exists. Some of these technologies could create new applications and new business value within the business that you're in. You don't need to be a technology expert, and you don't need to know about everything. You just need to know about things in the context of business value. Focus on your soft skills and your EQ. Understand that you will become more valuable not by becoming more like the machines, but becoming less like the machines. Don't out-machine the machines. Okay, IQ is obsolete. Okay, nobody's going to care how smart you are anymore. Okay, all that's going to be done by the computers. You need to focus on all those things that they used to say didn't matter. Okay, it's all of your interests and your curiosity and your creativity, your imagination. Okay, that's where your ability to work with other people, have emotional rapport. That's where you're going to be valuable inside an enterprise. You need to be willing to sort of to work together with technology in new synergistic ways. You got to be a continuous learner. You got to be committed to being generalist. You got to know a little bit about a lot of things, okay? And use online resources, know about use cases, seek out overview explanations of things, because that's the type of knowledge that people in your position are going to need. You do not need to be a cryptographic mathematician, okay? You do not need to be a Python programmer to survive what's going on right now. You need to know just enough to build mental models of how this technology could be useful, and then where you can get the resources that you need to sort of when you're working on a project. And finally, don't neglect the most important thing. Be prepared to lead the way. Okay, there may not be anybody in your organization that is taking a leadership role like there was in our organization, but you can be prepared to lead the way. You can be an advocate for this change. You can be a lobbyist for this change. You can help take responsibility for educating the people around you and the people above you about what might be possible. And above all, don't be afraid to kind of like to look elsewhere if you can't find those opportunities, because you got to watch out for yourself. So I hope you'll connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm out there. If you send me a LinkedIn invite, I'll accept it. But at this point, I'm done.
Great. Well, thank you. And with that, I thank you very much, Michael, for joining us today.
My pleasure.